I'm Erin, 35 years old, and I've always been the forgotten daughter. When my father died, he left my sister Amanda a $750,000 mansion in California. Me, I got a broken down cabin in Montana that was barely standing. They all laughed at my inheritance, thinking Dad had slighted me one final time. Little did they know that cabin would change everything. Before I share how I discovered what my parents truly left behind, let me know where you're watching from, hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt underestimated by the people who should believe in you the most. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Portland with my parents James and Margaret Taylor and my younger sister Amanda. From my earliest memories, it was clear who the favorite child was. While Amanda got new clothes for every season, I wore her hand-me-downs until they were threadbare. When Amanda won a participation ribbon at a swim meet, my parents took her out for ice cream and hung the ribbon on the refrigerator. When I made honor roll and later became valedictorian, I got a quick good job and nothing more. No matter how hard I tried, I could never measure up in their eyes. I threw myself into academics thinking surely that would make them proud. I joined every club, volunteered on weekends, and graduated at the top of my class. But at my graduation dinner, the conversation still revolved around Amanda's upcoming Sweet 16 party. The pattern continued when we went to college. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through state school, while my parents paid every penny for Amanda to attend an expensive private university. She partied through 4 years and barely graduated with a communications degree, while I earned a double major in environmental science and photography, still working nights and weekends to avoid student loans. Those years taught me self-reliance. I learned to depend on myself and find validation from within, though the emotional wounds ran deep. I developed a thick skin and a determination to succeed without their support. By the time I reached my 30s, I had built a successful career as a wildlife photographer. My work had been featured in National Geographic and other prestigious publications. I spent months traveling to remote locations capturing images of endangered species. The irony wasn't lost on me that I had found success in a career that kept me far from my family. Throughout all this, Thomas had been my rock. We met in college and he understood the complicated feelings I had toward my family. Unlike them, he celebrated my achievements and supported my ambitions. We had been together for 12 years, building a life based on mutual respect and shared dreams. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, I received the call that my father had suffered a massive heart attack. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. Despite our difficult relationship, the news hit me hard. The finality of death meant any chance of reconciliation or understanding between us was gone forever. A week after the funeral, we gathered at my parents' house for the reading of the will. My mother sat stone-faced in her armchair, genuinely devastated by the loss of her husband of 40 years. Amanda dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue, putting on a performance of grief that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her husband Daniel stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder in a show of support. The family lawyer, Mr. Patterson, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who had handled my parents' affairs for decades, arrived precisely at 10 o'clock. We sat in uncomfortable silence as he arranged papers on the coffee table. "Let's begin," he said, adjusting his glasses. "As is standard, I'll start with the distribution of assets. My mother received the family home and the majority of my father's financial assets, approximately $1.2 million in savings and investments. This wasn't surprising, as they had built their life together. To my daughter Amanda," Mr. Patterson read, "I leave our vacation property in Lake Tahoe, California, with its current market value of $750,000, as well as my investment portfolio valued at $300,000. Amanda squeezed Daniel's hand, a small smile playing at her lips, despite her attempt to maintain a solemn expression. The Lake Tahoe house was a beautiful 3-bedroom property with lake views and a private dock. My parents had purchased it as a vacation home when I was in high school, and it had appreciated significantly over the years. To my daughter, Erin," Mr. Patterson continued, and I sat up straighter, wondering what could possibly be left after the substantial bequests to my mother and sister. "I leave my hunting cabin in Montana, along with the 5 acres of land it sits on. That was it. The hunting cabin. A dilapidated 2-room structure in the middle of nowhere that hadn't been properly maintained in at least 20 years. I remembered visiting it a few times as a child, swatting mosquitoes and shivering under thin blankets as the wind howled through the cracks in the walls. Amanda let out a small laugh before quickly covering it with a cough. Daniel didn't bother hiding his smirk. My mother avoided my gaze, staring intently at her hands folded in her lap. "Is there anything else?" I asked, my voice steady, despite the humiliation burning in my chest. Mr. Patterson shuffled through his papers. "That concludes the specific bequests." I nodded, maintaining my composure, even as I felt the final confirmation of what I had always known in my father's eyes. I was worth less than my sister. Much less. I had a sudden flashback to my last visit to the cabin nearly 20 years ago. I was 15, and even then the place was falling apart. My father had brought me along on what he called a special trip, just the two of us, but spent most of the weekend on his satellite phone handling work calls while I explored the surrounding woods alone. I made my excuses and left the gathering early, unable to bear the weight of Amanda's triumphant glances or my mother's uncomfortable silence. That night I cried in Thomas's arms, finally allowing myself to feel the pain of a lifetime of being second best. "Maybe there's a reason," Thomas suggested gently. "Your dad was many things, but he wasn't stupid. Why give you a worthless cabin?" "Because that's what he thought of me," I replied, my voice hollow. "Worthless." For 2 weeks I avoided thinking about the cabin. I threw myself into work, editing photographs from my recent trip to Costa Rica and preparing for an upcoming exhibition, but the cabin lingered in the back of my mind, a final insult I couldn't quite shake. "You should at least go see it," Thomas said one evening. "Get some closure. Then you can decide whether to sell the land or whatever." He was right. I needed to face this final disappointment head on. So I packed my truck with supplies, including cleaning materials and tools, thinking I might at least make the place presentable enough to list with a real estate agent. The drive to western Montana took 2 days. As the miles stretched behind me, I found myself thinking about my father. James Taylor had been a complicated man. An investment banker by profession, he was respected in his field, but emotionally distant at home. I had spent my childhood trying to crack the code to earn his approval, never quite succeeding. When I finally turned onto the dirt road leading to the cabin, my heart sank. It was worse than I remembered. The roof sagged alarmingly in one corner. 2 windows were broken, covered with plastic that flapped in the breeze. The porch had partially collapsed, and the steps leading up to it were rotted through. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, parking my truck and surveying what was apparently my inheritance. I approached cautiously, testing each step before putting my full weight on it. The door creaked open with a push, revealing the musty interior. Dust motes danced in the beams of sunlight that streamed through the dirty windows. Mouse droppings littered the floor and cobwebs decorated every corner. The furniture was sparse: a sagging couch, a rickety table with 2 mismatched chairs, and a cast-iron stove that looked like it hadn't been lit in a decade. A door at the back led to a tiny bedroom with a metal-framed bed and a dresser with a cracked mirror. My phone rang, and Amanda's name flashed on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Just calling to see if you've visited your inheritance yet," she said, her voice syrupy sweet with false concern. "I'm here now," I replied neutrally. "Daniel and I are getting quotes from contractors for renovations on the Lake Tahoe house," she continued. "We're thinking of adding a hot tub on the deck overlooking the lake. What are your big plans for the cabin?" "Still figuring that out," I said, then made an excuse to end the call before she could twist the knife further. I stood in the middle of the cabin, anger bubbling up inside me. This was just one final slight, one last way for my father to show me where I stood in the family hierarchy. But I was determined to at least salvage what I could before selling the land. I spent the afternoon clearing out trash and sweeping away decades of dirt and animal droppings. In the bedroom, I found a box containing my father's old hunting gear, worthless now, but once expensive. In a drawer of the dresser, I discovered several notebooks bound in leather. Curious, I opened the most recent one and recognized my father's neat handwriting. These were journals he had kept during his trips to the cabin. I sat on the edge of the dusty bed and began to read. To my surprise, many entries mentioned me. Checked on the project today. One entry from 5 years ago read, "Making good progress. Erin would appreciate the methodical approach. She always was the patient one, unlike Amanda, who wants everything handed to her." Another entry, "Secured the documentation for Erin's future today. She'll understand why I've kept this place a secret from the rest of the family. She's the only one who would appreciate having to work for something rather than having it given to her." I frowned, confused by the cryptic references. What project was he talking about? And what did he mean by securing my future? I continued cleaning, pondering the journal entries. As I moved an ancient rug in the main room, I noticed something odd, a section of the wooden floor that didn't match the rest. Kneeling down, I discovered a trapdoor with a rusted padlock securing it closed. The lock was old and corroded, but still held firm when I tugged on it. I searched through drawers and cabinets until I found a toolbox with a rusted hacksaw and hammer. After an hour of struggling, sweating in the dusty cabin, the lock finally broke with a satisfying snap. I pulled open the heavy trapdoor, revealing a set of wooden stairs descending into darkness. Using the flashlight on my phone, I carefully made my way down into a cool, dark cellar I never knew existed. The space was surprisingly large and clean compared to the cabin above. Metal filing cabinets lined one wall. A large table in the center held maps and papers weighted down with rocks. Equipment I didn't recognize sat in one corner, covered with protective tarps. I approached the table first, shining my light on the papers. They appeared to be geological surveys and maps of the property and surrounding area. Red markings highlighted certain sections of the land with notes in my father's handwriting. One map had a large circle around an area labeled Main Deposit, with calculations in the margins. Next, I moved to the filing cabinets, pulling open the top drawer of the first one. Inside were neatly labeled folders: mineral rights, assay reports, mining claims. With growing bewilderment, I opened the folder labeled Assay Reports and found detailed scientific analyses of rock samples, all indicating high concentrations of gold. My hands trembling, I opened the most recent report, dated just 3 months before my father's death. The executive summary stated clearly, "Sample analysis confirms extensive gold deposit extending throughout the surveyed area. Conservative estimate of total deposit value, $83.7 million at current market prices." I staggered back, sitting heavily on a stool beside the table. $83 million. There had to be some mistake. This couldn't be real. In a daze, I continued exploring the cellar. On a small desk in the corner, I found an envelope with my name written on it in my father's handwriting. The seal was unbroken. With shaking fingers, I opened it and began to read. "Erin, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and you've discovered what I've kept secret for over a decade. 15 years ago, during one of my hunting trips, I discovered a gold nugget in the stream that runs through the property. Initial tests confirmed it wasn't just a fluke. There was a substantial gold deposit running through our land. I've spent years quietly securing the mineral rights and conducting surveys without attracting attention. The deposit is real and it's valuable. I could have mined it while I was alive, but I chose not to for reasons that may become clear to you. I've always seen in you what others missed. Your sister wants everything handed to her on a silver platter. Your mother means well, but enables Amanda's sense of entitlement. You were different. You worked for everything you achieved, never expecting handouts or special treatment. I left you this cabin knowing you would be the only one with the perseverance to discover its true value. I couldn't simply tell you about the gold or leave you money directly. Amanda and your mother would have contested the will, brought in lawyers, and the fortune would have been split and squandered. This way, the choice of what to do with this discovery is entirely yours. You've earned it through a lifetime of self-reliance that I always admired, but failed to acknowledge properly. I know I wasn't the father you deserved. I didn't know how to show my pride in you, and for that I'm truly sorry. Consider this my attempt to make things right. With respect and love, Dad. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. All those years I thought he hadn't noticed me, hadn't valued me. But in his own way, he had seen me more clearly than anyone. With newfound determination, I pulled out my phone and searched for mining experts in Montana. I needed to verify if what my father had discovered was real. The next morning, I met with Jackson Williams, a geology consultant with 20 years of experience in the mining industry. After signing a confidentiality agreement, I showed him the assay reports and took him to the property to examine the site himself. "Your father did his homework," Jackson said, reviewing the documentation in the cellar. "These are thorough surveys conducted by reputable firms." He was very methodical. "So it's real?" I asked, still struggling to believe it. "Very real," Jackson confirmed. "Based on these reports and my preliminary observations, the deposit is substantial. The $83 million valuation might actually be conservative depending on how gold prices move." My head spinning, I next consulted Sarah Chen, an attorney specializing in mining law. She confirmed that my inheritance explicitly included all mineral rights to the property. "Your father was careful to ensure everything was properly documented," she explained. "The mineral rights are clearly transferred to you in the deed. No one can contest that." "What if my family tries to claim they should get a portion?" I asked. "They have no legal grounds," Sarah assured me. "The will is specific. The cabin and all associated rights were left solely to you." Over the next few weeks, I developed a strategy. First, I would keep the discovery quiet while securing my legal position. I meticulously documented everything I found in the cellar, creating digital copies of all important papers. I consulted with financial advisors about how to manage such a substantial asset. Rather than selling the rights immediately, they suggested developing the mine responsibly and creating a sustainable business that would generate income for decades. I struggled with whether to tell my family about the discovery. Part of me wanted to see the looks on their faces when they realized what the worthless cabin actually contained. But another part feared they would try to take it from me through legal challenges or emotional manipulation. Instead, I focused on creating a business plan for an environmentally responsible mining operation. I researched ethical mining practices and connected with investors who specialized in sustainable resource extraction. With Jackson's help, I put together a team of experts who could help develop the mine with minimal environmental impact. One afternoon, as I stood on the property surveying the land that would soon become a carefully managed mining operation, I encountered an older man with a rifle slung over his shoulder. "You're trespassing," I informed him calmly. "Been hunting these woods for 30 years, he replied defensively. "No one's ever minded before." "Well, I mind," I said, standing my ground. "This is private property." He gave me a long look, then nodded reluctantly and turned to leave. As I watched him go, I realized I was standing taller, speaking more confidently. The knowledge of what I possessed had already changed me. That evening, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Amanda mentioned you're still at that cabin," she said. "When are you planning to sell it? It can't be worth much, but at least you could get something for the land." "I'm not planning to sell," I replied. "In fact, I'm fixing it up." "But why waste your time? It's just a broken-down old cabin." "I have my reasons," I said. "Actually, I'd like all of you to come visit next month. I have something I want to show you." There was a pause. "All of us. Even Amanda and Daniel." "Especially Amanda and Daniel," I replied. 3 months after discovering the gold, I invited my mother, Amanda, and Daniel to the cabin. They arrived reluctantly, complaining about the long drive and remote location. Their first surprise came when they saw me. I had always dressed practically in functional outdoor gear for my photography work. Today I wore a simple but expensive outfit that reflected my new financial status. I greeted them beside my new truck, a top-of-the-line model that had replaced my old reliable vehicle. "You look different," my mother commented, taking in my appearance. Amanda raised an eyebrow. "Wildlife photography must be paying better these days." I smiled. "You could say I've had some recent success." Their second surprise came when they saw the cabin. While I had maintained its rustic exterior, I had completely renovated the inside, creating a comfortable modern space that maintained the original character. "This is actually nice," my mother admitted, looking around in surprise. Amanda ran her hand over the new granite countertop in the kitchen. "I'm shocked you put money into this place. It's still in the middle of nowhere." I led them outside to the back of the property where preliminary site work had begun for the mining operation. Earth-moving equipment sat ready for the next phase of development. A small team of workers was conducting additional surveys. "What's all this?" Daniel asked, gesturing to the equipment and workers. "That," I said calmly, "is the beginning of a gold mining operation." They stared at me blankly. "There's a substantial gold deposit running through this property," I continued. "Dad discovered it 15 years ago and spent years quietly confirming it and securing the rights." "Gold?" Amanda repeated incredulously. "You're joking." "The deposit is valued at approximately $83 million, I said, watching their expressions transform from disbelief to shock. $83 million, Daniel whispered, his eyes widening. Amanda recovered first. "But this is a family discovery. Dad would have wanted us all to share in it. Actually, he was very specific about leaving the cabin and all associated rights solely to me," I replied. "But that's not fair," Amanda protested, her voice rising. "He didn't tell any of us about this. If we had known—" "That's exactly the point," I said. "He didn't want you to know. Surely your father would have wanted to provide for all of us." My mother interjected, her eyes calculating despite her reasonable tone. Daniel stepped forward. "We could contest the will. This changes everything. James clearly didn't disclose major assets." "You're welcome to try," I said, pulling out a folder. "My attorney assures me that everything is in order. Dad knew exactly what he was doing." I handed them copies of my father's letter. As they read, their expressions cycled through disbelief, anger, and finally, for Amanda, pure rage. "This is ridiculous," she exploded, throwing the letter down. "You manipulated him somehow. You always were jealous of what I had. I didn't even know about the gold until after he died," I pointed out. "Read the letter again. Dad saw exactly who we both were." "We're family," my mother said, attempting a conciliatory tone. "We should share this blessing." "Like you shared everything else with me?" I asked quietly. "Like the college education you paid for Amanda but not for me? Like the constant support and praise you gave her while ignoring my achievements?" Amanda stormed toward the car. "We'll see what our lawyers have to say about this, Daniel. We're leaving." My mother lingered, torn between following Amanda and staying to try to convince me. "I'm not obligated to share anything," I told her. "But I am establishing a family foundation that will fund educational opportunities for students who, like me, have to work their way through college without family support. You and Amanda will be welcome to serve on the board if you'd like to be involved." She looked at me for a long moment, then followed Amanda and Daniel to the car. As they drove away, I could see them arguing inside the vehicle. I knew this wouldn't be the end of it, but for the first time I felt completely secure in my position. 1 year later, the initial phase of the mining operation was well underway. We were using innovative, environmentally friendly extraction methods that minimized the impact on the surrounding ecosystem. The project had created jobs for the local community and was being hailed as a model for responsible resource development. Instead of using my newfound wealth for extravagant purchases, I established a trust focused on sustainable business investments and conservation efforts. The cabin had been fully restored, maintaining its rustic charm while adding modern amenities. I split my time between the cabin and my small apartment in Portland, finding unexpected peace in the place that had once represented my father's rejection. Amanda and Daniel had indeed attempted a legal challenge to the will, hiring an aggressive attorney who specialized in estate disputes. But my father's meticulous documentation and explicit instructions left them no opening. After 6 months and significant legal fees, they abandoned the effort. My relationship with my mother gradually improved after the initial shock wore off. At first, she called frequently with thinly veiled attempts to convince me to share the wealth. But eventually she seemed to accept the situation and even expressed pride in how I was managing the business. "Your father would be impressed," she told me during a recent visit to the cabin. "He always said you had a good head for business, though I don't think he ever told you that." With part of the proceeds from the mine, I established the James Taylor Scholarship Fund, providing full college scholarships to hardworking students from disadvantaged backgrounds. The first class of 10 scholars would begin their education next fall. I continued my work as a wildlife photographer, but now I could fund conservation initiatives for the endangered species I photographed. My exhibition, Hidden Value, had received critical acclaim with many reviewers, noting the newfound depth and confidence in my work. Thomas and I were discussing marriage, talking about building a home that would combine his love of architecture and my appreciation for natural settings. Our relationship had weathered the storm of sudden wealth with surprising ease, perhaps because we had already built such a solid foundation. Looking back on the journey from that first devastating reading of the will to where I stood now, I realized how much I had learned. The pain of feeling undervalued by my parents had shaped me in ways I was only beginning to understand. It had taught me self-reliance and perseverance, qualities my father had recognized and in his own flawed way had wanted to reward. I had spent so much of my life feeling like I wasn't enough, that I would never measure up to Amanda in my parents' eyes. The irony was that it was precisely those qualities that made me different from her that my father had ultimately respected: my independence, my willingness to work hard, my ability to delay gratification. The greatest gift wasn't the gold. It was finally understanding that the traits I had developed in response to feeling overlooked were actually strengths. And there was a strange peace in knowing that in the end, my father had seen and valued those strengths, even if he had never found a way to tell me while he was alive. Sometimes the most valuable things in our lives don't come in shiny packages with big bows. Sometimes they're hidden beneath the surface, waiting for us to dig deep enough to discover them. Have you ever received a gift that seemed disappointing at first, but turned out to be valuable in unexpected ways? Or have you discovered strength in yourself that came from overcoming challenges or feeling underestimated? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of unexpected transformations and hidden treasures. And don't forget to share with someone who might need a reminder that sometimes what looks like rejection might actually be a blessing in disguise. Thank you for listening, and remember, your true worth isn't determined by how others value you, but by how you value yourself.